Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to greet you all today as a part of our annual Equity Summit. Today, we're going to be talking about driving innovation with inclusive leadership. I am happy to step in as moderator for today's session. My name is Emma Holland. I lead community for Start Out, and I'm joined today by Dan and AJ. I will have them introduce themselves in just a moment. The point of today's conversation is that research shows that diverse teams are better positioned to unlock the innovation that drives market growth. Diversity further enables nonlinear and novel thinking about the adaptability that innovation requires, thereby strengthening that link between innovation and revenue. So, the question that we're asking ourselves today is how can you make sure that you are building this type of leadership in your organization? And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Dan first to introduce yourself. Welcome, Dan.
Great. Thank you, Emma. Appreciate being on the panel and welcome everyone who's watching from all the entrepreneurs across the world, hopefully. My name is Daniel Vidani. I'm the president of Innovation Studio. We are a Boston-based nonprofit organization that works to essentially establish a non-barrier and really easy access of capabilities for people who are either wanting to start a business or grow a business here in the greater Boston area. We have reach all the way through New England and into Providence and, hoping to grow over time. But yeah, happy to be here and lend some kind of thought process and ideas of how we can approach this inclusive leadership concept, which is so vital for today's, workforce and kind of development. Thank you.
For sure.
And without further ado, I'm going to welcome AJ now to the stage.
Hi, thank you so much. So nice to be with you and be in community with all of you, Daniel, Emma, and everyone who's joining us. My name is AJ De Leon. I am the CEO of Innovare, just like you read in my t-shirt. Innovare is an education technology company that focuses on empowering leaders of schools, school systems, and other organizations in education to use data strategically. And we have been doing that since 2017. I'm actually coming to you from San Francisco right now, where I'm attending the SaaStr conference here around, talking to other tech entrepreneurs, representing the LGBT community, and really trying to enhance diversity within this space because it's much needed for sure. But yeah, I mean, I think my company, one of the greatest assets that not only do we prioritize equity or have prioritized equity since day one, which of course I've led that charge as the first founder, and my entire executive team is full of people of color. All of them, 100% of the executive team at the company are people of color and women. And the company also focuses on, of course, enhancing the inclusion, right, of our people, because they always say, diversity is being invited to the party, but inclusion is being asked to dance, right? And so I think for us, it's really important to not just look like the people that we serve, but also impact internally how our employees and how we see ourselves as well within the ecosystem, but also how our employees see the company they're working for as a place where they can be themselves, they can bring all of themselves to the table, and because that's what we want. And we believe that that's good business. And, as a social enterprise, there's no better place than for us to start, right, than in our own company. So I look forward to sharing more with you about our experiences in those areas. And it's great to be here with all of you again. Thank you.
Well, you couldn't have set me up better with your intro there, AJ. Something that I've been thinking about is as companies focus more intently on innovation, whether it's, the big transformational kind or if it's smaller incremental improvements and pivots, we're also seeing a growing trend in really recognizing the value of diversity in the innovation process. We hear things like going diverse by design in order to innovate, and that's hard work, right? It's not just a matter of bringing diverse people together, like you mentioned. So I would really love for you both to share, what does inclusive leadership mean to you? And what are ways that you prioritize inclusive leadership in your organization? Feel free, either of you, if you would like to start first.
Go ahead, AJ.
Thanks, Daniel. Yeah, I mean, I think, as I mentioned, going to that analogy of the party and the dancing, I think that I'm sort of the hype man, right, for that for that dance. It's really about
Mm.
not or hype person, for the dance. I think you really have to not just demonstrate that you are inclusive, and of course the diversity, people will be able to see it, right? It's palpable to everyone, but really generating opportunities for me. So I guess I would say it's three things. First is you have to be excited and authentic about bringing diverse people into your organization, right? And make that a priority. Second is you have to set up an infrastructure and the resources, and like, they said, what's not being monitored is not getting done, right? So for me, like, for example, if I don't see a black face on my team's website, or if I don't see enough women in the engineering team or whatever, like, that is a priority for me. And it's not something that I take lightly. And so I make partnerships with organizations to, enhance our pipeline or whatever needs to be done. So number one is you have to be excited and authentic about it. Number two, you have to do the work to ensure that, you cannot blame the society for the lack of women engineers. Like, they're out there. You got to find them. You got to do the work to find them. And thirdly, you got to measure that it's working, you know? So after you bring in the people, after you've been excited yourself, like, is it actually working in the organization? Like, do people feel included? Do they feel heard? Do they feel affirmed, seen, etc.? So those are the three ways that I would say. Of course, there's a lot more to it, but I would say, at least in my case, how I consider myself an inclusive leader is by being authentic and true about it. So second, doing the work and working with my team to enhance our diversity and maintain it, since in our case we have that problem to maintain it, which is good. And third is to ensure that it's not just um, on paper, so to speak, but that people do feel like it's an organization that's truly inclusive, and that it's on an ongoing basis evaluated to make sure that it's staying where you want it to be. I'll pass it over to Dan.
Great. Thank you, AJ. I love what you just said, and I like how you broke it down into those 3 points. For me, and I subscribe to everything you just said. I think one of the things we've done that I've had to do in our organization is to really put together a strategic plan. I think by having a strategic plan that you, your board, your staff, and yourself are towards, it's very important as a starting point, because you're right. You can't hire the right people, bring in the right people. You can't do the work, and you can't measure it, back to your points, AJ, unless you have something like that in place. So I think that's one of the most important things that any leader, and I know it's really hard to do that right away. And, believe me, it's not, it's easier said than done. We spent probably 7 months doing that last year, putting our strategic plan in place. And it was a lot of work, a lot of consultants, a lot of time and effort and energy, but I think it was well worth the pain and suffering, and all of those hours to focus, because otherwise we can't have conversations about what we're doing and why we're doing it unless we can point back to that strategic plan. And the big thing for us was kind of setting a north, right? I think that having a strategic plan is all based on where you're headed. And for me, the North Star, and how I've explained it to our staff and to our board, and there was a lot of conversation, is the North Star and your vision is there for when you get stuck. Okay. And it's because it keeps you on track. And if you think you're doing something or involved in conversations that are not going to create that kind of approach for your organization from an inclusiveness perspective, that North Star is hopefully encompasses the right thing in it to think about, and it hopefully draws you back to where you need to go. So I would say that that's the starting point of a lot of these conversations within yourselves and your teams, and how you then come forward out of that conversation to be as inclusive as possible within all of the facets that you're running your organization with.
It's tremendous. I love I love the idea of kind of centralizing on a North Star and being able to continuously come back to that. I think particularly in different organizations, we think about how do we consistently measure success back to those like key goals, right? I know I'm sure that's something you're talking about regularly with your team. I often hear about how, cognitive diversity is such a huge asset to a team, but only if every thinker is going to get a voice. The more diverse the team, also, the more important it is to have that skilled leader in your organization. AJ, you mentioned about infrastructure. We've talked about measurements. We've talked about metrics and central thoughts. I'm curious as to what are some ways that you and other leaders in your organization are encouraging those voices by whether it's creating what we call, and what I've heard, safe or brave space for them to be able to lead in a way that brings their voice forward to the table. Could you share more about that infrastructure, how you make sure all those contributions are respected and heard? And then what are some of those ways that you measure success?
Sure. Yeah, I think the at Innovair we do several things. So first is it starts sort of in the entire life journey of the experience of our teammates. So first is generate a lot of, we create the right marketing that speaks to, and we believe um, catches the eye, right, and shows and affirms the people that we're trying to find. So if you look at our applications, like all the announcements on social media, anything that's on our website, like if we want Black women, you'll see Black women on there, like the imagery, the choice of like even how we promote the position, in other words, like we make that very explicit, that we want to bring in more people like that, and I think that is an unapologetic piece that we work on with our, my chief. I work with my chief of staff and our HR folks, right? And my graphic designers. And again, this you got to do the work to like really choose the right people, because if people, for example, when we were hiring engineers, we want more females, more to join our team, or people, female identified. So we have pushed that out in all of our social media channels, in our, advertisements, and also have partnered directly with organizations that focus on women in STEM, and Start Out and other organizations like these, and promote them in those specific spaces. So that's number one. It's like sort of the the recruitment aspect, right? And so there's a marketing aspect to it. There's a policy piece, and then there's this sort of investment in time and effort. Second is once we bring people in, we use a technology. I should probably give them a shameless plug, but it's called 15.5, which some of you may be familiar with. It's a social science driven, basically social emotional and or HR engagement tool. So we believe in tech, right? Obviously, as tech people ourselves, and data as well. So this tool allows us to measure the pulse of people every week. So basically, every week our employees complete a survey that it takes 5 minutes. That's why it's called 15.5, because it takes 5 minutes for them to do. It just basically asks them, how are you feeling today, like this week? Is there anything we can do for you? Do you think the company is helping you? So it has like cute questions that are framed in a certain way to elicit engagement, basically, and help folks share if they feel underappreciated, if they feel overwhelmed, do they feel like their team doesn't, like them, whatever it is. They have a safe, quote unquote, virtual space, to your point, brave space, courageous space. I would call it radical candid space, where they can really be themselves and ask for help also. And even, in fact, if they talk about their manager, that allows you to pass it up to somebody, like to a manager's manager, so that person can actually address it. So it also gives the manager a safe space to, if they don't feel like they can answer this, if it's a question that was directed about being a woman in tech or doing whatever, like we can pass it up or pass it to sideways to someone who can maybe be more efficient at that. So that's sort of our infrastructure, sort of on the consistency of it. And then, of course, we do annually, we do like a survey, right, of our employees, an engagement survey, where they tell us the truth. And honestly, sometimes the data is not good, And like in my last company survey, we there was a lot of focus on fairness, for example. And so, and so now as a result, we created what I call a fairness committee to literally react to the same issue that was brought up. So again, not hiding from the data. Like as leaders, sometimes we see it, we don't like it, we don't agree with it, and we think that maybe we're doing better than what our employees think or our teammates think. But you just have to accept it, and whatever perceptions they have, those are realities. So I would say on the recruitment side, definitely put out there the message of who you want to invite into your party, going back to my analogy, so people feel like okay, this is a party for me, right? I'm welcomed here. Second is when they are with you, understand that they are having a good time, right? So every week, really take that pulse and have those conversations, whether they might be tough or not. And thirdly, like, really assess yourself by giving them the mirror, and sort of allowing them to tell you what they think that is going on. Because I can tell you that as a LGBT Latinx leader, like I think I'm always I have my pulse on diversity, but maybe not. And also, to be honest, I also have cisgender white males working in my company. So how do I make sure that I'm inclusive of them as well? And of course, we have different people of different religions and different beliefs and sexual, identities and orientations. So I think we never can assume that because we are people of color or we are women or we are leaders who believe in diversity and inclusion that we're doing the work to make sure that other people feel that way. So that's my only kind of icing on the cake that I would say on top of that infrastructure.
I appreciate the sharing of like understanding where you exist in your assumed identities. It's something that what spaces where you have that kind of leadership and historical background and experience and intersectionality, but also understanding to ask for input wherever possible where you don't intersect. I really appreciate that call out. Dan, I'm wondering if there's anything else that you would like to add to part of this conversation before I move us forward.
Yeah, no, thank you for the opportunity. Yeah, AJ, great stuff. Those are some great ideas that, clearly as we grow as an organization, we can utilize. So I may tap into that and reach out. But yeah, I think for us, we're a small team, no more than 15 people. We're spread out, so we're not necessarily like in one location, which is good and bad, right? Especially in the world we live in. But we have every other week we do a town hall, and we start with wins, right? Essentially, you got to celebrate the things that you do well, first and foremost, because I always try to ask people like, okay, so tell me where you're at. What are the wins that you've seen? And sometimes they'll call a colleague out and say, hey, I really want to call this person out because I feel like he's not going to say it, but I'm going to basically put it out there for him. And it's all healthy and stuff, but I think it's important that we celebrate the wins that we're having as a team, despite how small they are. But little wins and small wins are going to add up over time, and it's going to create opportunities, and it's also going to show your colleagues and your team how you're working towards the mission of the organization, right? First and foremost. And again, not everything is always positive. Back to the point is, we do quarterly surveys, the same thing, and you're trying to learn is where are we at, and then we focus on the areas of opportunity and improvement, the growing opportunities that are there, just like we're talking about the pros of who we are, but the growth is where we need to focus on. And as long as it's within our strategic plan and our capabilities to do that, we can draw ourselves into like, does that still fit into it? Is it a priority? Because again, you don't want to keep going off into all these other areas and then take your eye off the ball, because you can no longer measure the success or where you want to be. And it's important to say, does success look like for this project, this group of people, this team, whether it's short term, medium, or long term. And I think it's important to draw people back to that. So clearly, I think what AJ said and all these other things that we're doing are good ways to approach and just try things out to see how they work with your team, right? Not everything works in terms of the larger group. Sometimes you need to use a subset of that with different groups there.
I so value what you both have shared around this, and particularly thinking about what that means internally and from like a truly the back end of your business backbone and how that builds. I would love to kind of flip the idea now, because we understand that other folks joining us today are founders, entrepreneurs, people who are building their businesses. And I would love to take a moment to step into the kind of business side of things. You both work in roles that are very key to driving your organization forward. And I'm curious, just specifically your opinion in the business perspective, and in a role where you have been in that kind of entrepreneurial seat or in that like key leadership seat. Why does innovation matter? That's kind of my big open-ended question. And what are some approaches that other small organizations, large organizations can and should be getting started on?
Yeah, I could take that first. I mean, with you started your organization, you came up with an idea, and innovation was the core, right? But you can't allow that innovation to just you're constantly challenged. And I don't look at it from a competitive perspective. Look at it as where you want to be. That's going to put everybody worries about their competition, but the likelihood of to take your idea and completely stamp it and steal it from you happen. But it's going to. So I think it's most important to work with you and your organization and the problem you're trying to solve, and take care of itself. In the process of you've got the right infrastructure, operational, the right strategic plan, the right things that I think are very important in order to essentially establish yourself and your team. Because you're right, that is going to happen, but not everybody else. That's what.
Thank you. AJ, I would love to hear your addition to that, particularly as an entrepreneur and founder in a growing business.
Yeah, thank you. No, I mean, I love everything that he said, and what I would add is just, something about innovation is you have to be willing to be disruptive. Like you have to be willing to, move the needle. I always talk about, and if you've seen me in other panels, you hear me use this phrase of not just wanting to have a seat at the table, but really change the entire seating arrangement, you know, and also think about who's not in the room. Like how many more seats can we add to this table, right? So for me, I think innovation, obviously my company is called Innovare, which means to innovate, to reform, and to change. And we take that very seriously. Like we don't just want to do that in with the product that we have, which helps leaders use data to make good decisions and innovate in their own right. But we try to do that in the spaces that we are part of, right? So we're part of the reform movement in education by bringing tech to that space and disrupting sort of the usual conversation around just maybe charter schools and policy changes and putting more funding into schools by saying, no, we have all that stuff. We like all that, but we also need to make the leaders better, So we kind of, bring that perspective and that point of view. And then on the tech side, everybody wants to invest in the next dating app or the next fintech company. Or I'm in this conference now, and all the sponsors are fintech companies, right? So or other the apps that all of you know, right? So where are the social impact investors? Where are the social impact companies elevated as the next frontier after a pandemic, after a global health wake up call? Where are like all the investments going to social impact driven organizations? So I think innovation is not just a act. I think it's a movement, and I think we need to be, especially as LGBT leaders or quote unquote leaders, right? Like we need to be self-perceived number one as leaders. And to your point about our intersections, I think many of us have an opportunity to build bridges among communities, and to really galvanize the power of others and sort of bring in women, bring in people of color, bring in LGBT folks into the conversation, and that only makes us stronger, right? So I would say innovation is key to everything that we do at Innovare, not just in our work, but also in our personal mission to be disruptive within the spaces that we work in, and also in the spaces that we're a part of. And I think that, with that, I would tell you, I encourage everyone, and that's my call to action for all of us who are listening, especially as an LGBT person, an LGBT founder or aspiring founder or investor. Like, you have an actual opportunity to lead in the conversation, because you really can bring perspectives that sometimes other people are close to or don't understand. And I think you can really, and you're not going to get innovation when there is not that spark of ideas, and those happen when people express themselves, right? And if they don't feel comfortable, sometimes what we do as LGBT folks is we make people comfortable, or because we've had to learn how to make ourselves thrive in uncomfortable spaces, we are able to find their voice, so to speak. And that, I think, equals innovation. Like, voice equals innovation, and hence the inclusive aspect to it. When you put inclusive voice, then you really get innovation squared, in my opinion.
I love the idea that you just brought up about um, how folks who often have those various intersections in their identities, what we heard in our keynote earlier this morning, for instance, as the underestimated people, often do hold doors open for those who are like or adjacent to their identities to make sure that that can move forward. I think that ties in tremendously to this conversation overall. I've noticed that Dan, it looks like, is having some bandwidth issues, so we'll wait until he is able to join us again. But would love to ask you also, AJ, if someone was looking to build their organization with these concepts in mind, what is the key thing that you would share with that business leader that you wish that you knew so much earlier?
About just this entire topic in
Yeah,
general.
I think you've spoken so well around what you've done at the very beginning of your business to kind of really, I love, change the seating arrangement, about what it means to be learning as you're going and iterating to create those braver spaces for people to raise their
Mhm.
hands. And, with each of those like shifts and pivots definitely comes some learning. And now you're in a space where you're growing, where there's interest in investment and everything else. Some
Yes.
folks we've heard think about how maybe this isn't something to prioritize at the beginning. For instance, if you need to focus on investment, or if you need to think about other parts of your business sustainability. I'm really just curious around if you were to sit down with that early stage founder who is just getting started and is thinking about building these type of inclusivity and innovation leadership hiring portions of their company, what's something that you would share?
Yeah, thank you for re-explaining that. I get it. I think you're right. Sometimes when we start the companies, right, and those of you who are here with us who might be thinking or growing your company or scaling it like we are, we thinking about the people. Obviously, we know that people are going to be working here or there in your organization, but for me, really, diversity and inclusion, I really call it equity, right, is what we need to prioritize. Because if we don't think of ourselves as an equity champion or as an equity driver, I don't think that we could sell what we sell, and we couldn't get the same, or at least we wouldn't get the same response. So to give you some concrete advice to your point about, like, okay, I would say if you're in the founding stage, like pre-seed, you're really just trying to get started and get off the ground, it's totally okay to, like, not think about what your infrastructure will be around HR and stuff like that, because that is not a priority today, because you're just trying to get off the ground, right? And so you're trying to get your first friends and family raise, if that's the path that you're seeking, or bootstrapping your way to the next milestone. So that takes a lot of focus, and it takes a lot of drive to do. And you, as an already, you're here in this session, so clearly you are attuned with the topic. So trust yourself, like believe in yourself, believe that you are going to be good at what you do, and in terms of your leadership for others, in its service to others. So I would say, focus on your business. Basically, if you're stage like pre-seed, just getting it off the ground, focus on the business model, the product market fit, the ability of the market, like the real kind of the business canvas categories, and then that doesn't mean that you don't think about the people, who they are, or what they should feel like when they work with you, especially if you have to find a co-founder, because it's a little bit like finding a romantic partner, where you have to have that complementary skill set as well as values alignment and all that other stuff. So I would say, if they're in that stage, like, don't, just trust yourself and your leadership, that you are gonna figure it out, basically. Now, when you get to that stage where you're scaling, though, when you are welcome back then, when you get to the that, I would say it has to become a priority, because if you didn't invest in it before, totally understandable. You had to get your business off the ground. You had to keep the lights on. You can't have diversity and inclusion in a business if you don't have one, right? So you have to have one in place. So once you get to a certain threshold, though, to like where Daniel and I are, like when you have over 10 people, basically, that does flag for you to start thinking, because now, like it's in my case, I'm the co-founder of, there's two other co-founders, and my other two co-founders are men of color. Both of them are not gay, though. So, for me, it's like, having those perspectives. Now we have 14 people, so they are, the majority of the team is not the founders, right? So they are the culture, basically. So whatever, so you need to interpret that when you are outnumbered. So if you have one founder, maybe a co-founder, there's two of you. When you have four people, that's still sort of not as urgent. But once you have five people, six, etc., that's an easy way to think about it, I guess. Like, once there's more of the employees than there are of you, the initial original team, or the founding team, or whatever. You need to think about it, and you need to think about it. It doesn't mean that you have to hire an HR person or anything like that, because that takes a lot of resources as well. In our case, we use Bambi HR, which is like an app that helps us do that in an affordable way. I keep giving all these plugs. I should get a commission for these. But they're good, and they help us kind of bridge, basically, before hiring a full-time person. We can use them as a resource, so like an outsourced HR person. So that would be kind of like my succinct answer. If you are pre-seed, just starting, trust yourself that you're gonna figure it out. Do the work to build the business so that you can have the resources to make it truly inclusive and invest in your people, because we haven't even talked about compensation, all that stuff. And then secondly, you have to, when you get to scaling, though, make it a priority. And by bringing in HR reps or consultants, and really, when the employees outnumber the founders, that's when I would say it's time to really prioritize not just diversity and inclusion, but everything, everything around, like, human resources. Make it more formal.
Thank you for that. And I appreciate the summary too, because those feel very concrete, and they highlight so many of the folks that have joined us in this conversation today. Dan, the question that I had asked, just to reiterate, is like, what are we thinking would be the key thing you would share with that business leader that you wish that you knew earlier?
Yeah, no, great question. And thanks, AJ. I was sorry for the bandwidth issues. I was listening to a little bit of your end there. But I think the thing that I wish I had known a little bit earlier, and that I've also shared with a lot of founders that I've worked, is, one, trust yourself, trust where you're going, but also make sure that, as you're building and, finding a co-founder or co-founders and starting to add, is that add people that are going to complement and strengthen, what you're trying to do. And, don't, obviously, each of you bring something, a new skill set to the table, right? And I agree with what AJ said, is The moment you start, outnumbering yourself, then you're trying to basically, you're specializing, right? You're hiring experts in certain areas, and you have to choose what those experts need to do, and how they're going to achieve your, strategic plan, and your process that you're going forward with. But first and foremost, trust yourself and the reasons why, but don't be afraid to bring on people that are going to challenge you, right? And challenge your way of thinking, because otherwise, it's groupthink is not good in a startup or in a small organization. You have to bring those perspectives to the table, and not everybody's going to say yes to it, right? And that's okay. But you have to be transparent about it, and open and honest, and create a culture and a safe space, or a brave space, however you want to call it. And that's an important factor, that, it's not just today, it's every single day for the rest of how the organization is going to grow and exist. So that's the culture you want to bring. In today's world, we have to hire people that may not be near you, right? Culturally, you may have to hire somebody that's nowhere near where you can actually see them on a daily basis. Culture could quickly turn a different angle if you're not, hiring on the right people as well, right? And so make sure that if you're going to hire somebody that's going to be remote most of the time, that doesn't create a culture that's different from where you're headed or where you want to be as well, right? Because it could quickly outnumber you, right? And as back to, as AJ said, it could become an issue that you're not anticipating. And that's an important part of the world we now live in compared to before.
I think that is a beautiful addition to what AJ was mentioning too. Love the concept of not being afraid of the voices that challenge you, of really embracing them, and making sure and understanding that you can both rise to the challenge and figure out why those challenges are coming up, what problems they are trying to solve, and what they're bringing to light in the way that your business is being structured and growing and scaling, like we mentioned, AJ. These are incredibly awesome and also kind of concrete things that I believe that our founders and our community would be able to continue thinking about. Now we've got about 5 more minutes in our session, and I do see that we have a handful of questions. I would like to ask you one of the ones that came through our Q&A, if that sounds great. I really love this question, and I would love for us to just kind of think around it. Which should come first within the innovation process? Equity or impact?
Go ahead,
What are
AJ.
your thoughts around that?
Yeah. No, this feels to me like we should come first, like ice cream or, whatever
Ooh, I love this. Yes.
like you like. I mean, it's really a tough choice, but I would say yes, to keep it light, because that's serious, loaded words. But I would say basically these are both. I think they're actually the same, honestly. Like equity
Mm,
and impact are really the same, because especially in our country that is so un in it's where there's so many
yes.
inequities.
Yes.
Just just you being equitable will have an impact,
Mm, mm,
on the country, on your business, on the society. By the way, everybody who's here, like, we just commend you. We please seek us out on LinkedIn, whatever, if you need us. I'm in Chicago. If I said some folks are from Chicago, like, let's be friends in real life. Like, we don't have this doesn't have to end here.
mm.
That is where impact starts, like with people
Mm,
making relationships, and I definitely won't take all the 5 minutes so that Daniel can chime in, but I would just say, don't see those things as mutually exclusive. I think that you can have both.
mm.
I think that you can really seek to impact by being equitable, and vice versa. Like, if you are impactful,
Yeah.
you will drive equity because you will
Mm,
represent a new level of success that maybe our youth need to see, so they love themselves more, and our parents need to see so they are not scared for us, and our romantic partners can see that we're gonna be okay. So
yes.
it's like it makes a real impact, I guess, in the world. But Daniel, I'll pass it over to you. So to get
Yeah.
close us out, brother.
No, thank you. I don't think I agree. They're not mutually exclusive, in terms of that. But I think you can do both, and
Mm,
it's just a matter of being intentional And just making sure you surround yourself with the right people. It's always, I mean, I look forward to getting up in the morning, and whether I'm going into the office and meeting some of my team or being on calls, throughout the day, I always ask how they're doing, right? And I think my staff has also gotten used to asking me, hey, how are you doing when I see them, either in person or virtually? And I think it's a good way to just start rather than going right into the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
It's important, yes, to get to business and get to the deal of what you're trying to solve, so that you can get there and allow people to move forward.
Yeah.
But it's always great to say, how's your weekend? How was your night? How was your morning? How's your dog doing? How's, whatever. That's building relationships is the most important thing, in terms of making sure that you can have honest conversations
Yeah.
and transparent conversations. And then they're not awkward, right?
Yeah.
They won't become awkward later. They become awkward because you don't have anything that you understand about the person, right? And then you're surprised by them wanting to leave or be in a different direction or whatever. Try not to be surprised about that. But the only way is by building
Mm-hmm.
relationships. Is first as important.
Yes, tremendous. Thank you both for your response. In our final minute, I just would love to kind of turn the microphone back to you and say, is there anything that you would like to share today with the audience that we have that I didn't ask you that you want to make sure that we drive home?
I look, the thing is that whatever you're doing, make sure that you're a part of and making driving solutions. Just
Yes.
be you can't solve a solution that you don't care about, right? You have right. It's really something where it's just not of an interest, right? So find an organization, find a company, find a co-founder that you share that with, right? I think that's important. So
Yes.
Totally agree everything he said, and I would say, going back to the beginning of your first question, like really know that you are uniquely qualified. Like everybody who's here, you are uniquely qualified to lead in the conversation of diversity and inclusion. We, as LGBT folks, as people of color, as women, as everything that we all are, because we're more than all these identities and labels. I think, however, we are attuned to that intersectionality in a way that others aren't. So I would say leverage that, like
Yes.
leverage that, and don't feel like you have to be taught how to do this. You know how to do this. You have the tools and the toolkit to do it. Do it.
That is such a strong note to leave on. I so value and appreciate you both today. The leadership that you are bringing to this world, it is very heartening for someone like me to know that there are leaders like you out there really kind of prioritizing this. Thank you both just so much. Everyone, thank you in the audience for joining us today. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, but thank you. Take care, good evening, and good afternoon. Thank you, everyone.